Human slavery is a stain on human history. It is a practice as old as civilization itself. For centuries, people have been exploited for their labor, denied their freedom, and treated as property. The transatlantic slave trade was a particularly horrific chapter in this history. Millions of Africans were forcibly transported to the Americas to work on plantations. The conditions were brutal. Many died on the journey. Those who survived faced a life of unimaginable cruelty. Slavery was officially abolished in the United States in 1865. However, the fight for freedom and equality was far from over. The legacy of slavery continues to haunt us today. It is evident in the persistence of systemic racism, economic inequality, and mass incarceration. The struggle against slavery is a reminder that human rights are not given, they are fought for. It is a fight that continues to this day. We must never forget the lessons of the past. We must remain vigilant in our pursuit of a just and equitable world for all. It is important to acknowledge the different forms that slavery has taken throughout history. These forms include forced labor, debt bondage, and sex trafficking. We must also recognize the ways in which slavery intersects with other forms of oppression, such as racism, sexism, and classism. By understanding the complexities of slavery, we can better address its root causes and work towards its eradication. The 13th Amendment to the US Constitution was a landmark achievement. It abolished slavery and involuntary servitude. However, it included a critical exception. Slavery was still permissible as punishment for a crime. This loophole would have devastating consequences for generations to come. After the Civil War, Southern states were determined to maintain their system of racial hierarchy and control. They exploited the 13th Amendment loophole to their advantage. They enacted black codes, laws that criminalized black people for minor offenses like vagrancy or loitering. These laws led to the mass arrest and imprisonment of black people. They were then leased out to private companies as forced labor. This system, known as convict leasing, was essentially a new form of slavery. It allowed white landowners to profit from black labor while circumventing the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment loophole set the stage for the mass incarceration crisis that plagues the United States today. It is a stark reminder that the fight for freedom and justice is an ongoing struggle. Today, millions of people are trapped in modern-day slavery within the US prison system. The 13th Amendment loophole allows for the legal enslavement of incarcerated individuals. They are forced to work for little or no pay under threat of punishment. Prison labor is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Corporations and government agencies profit from the exploitation of incarcerated workers. They produce goods and services at a fraction of the cost of free labor. The types of work performed by incarcerated individuals vary widely. They may include agricultural labor, manufacturing, janitorial services, and even call center operations. The conditions are often harsh and dangerous. Inmates are denied basic labor protections. They have little recourse if they are injured or mistreated. This system of forced labor is a clear violation of human rights. It perpetuates racial and economic injustice. We must demand an end to prison slavery and fight for the dignity and rights of all incarcerated people. The legacy of slavery and the 13th Amendment loophole are inextricably linked to the mass incarceration of black people in the United States. Black Americans are incarcerated at more than 5 times the rate of white Americans. This disparity is not a result of higher crime rates, but rather of systemic racism and discriminatory policies. The so-called war on drugs has been a major driver of mass incarceration. It has disproportionately targeted black and brown communities. This, despite the fact that drug use rates are similar across racial groups. The criminal justice system is rife with racial bias. It is evident in every stage, from racial profiling and police brutality to prosecutorial discretion and sentencing disparities. Once incarcerated, black and brown people face harsher treatment and are less likely to receive parole or other forms of early release. Mass incarceration has had a devastating impact on black communities. It has torn apart families, destabilized neighborhoods, and perpetuated cycles of poverty and violence. We must address the root causes of mass incarceration and work towards a more just and equitable criminal justice system. Section 5. A global crisis, human trafficking in Brazil and beyond. Human trafficking is a global epidemic. Millions of people around the world are trapped in forced labor, sexual exploitation, and other forms of modern-day slavery. Brazil is a major hub for human trafficking. Victims are often lured from impoverished communities with promises of work and a better life. They are then forced into exploitative conditions in industries such as agriculture, mining, and construction. The case of the 34 workers rescued from a BYD construction site in Brazil highlights the brutal reality of human trafficking. These individuals were subjected to forced labor, debt bondage, and inhumane living conditions. Human trafficking is a complex issue with no easy solutions. It requires a multifaceted approach that addresses the root causes such as poverty, inequality, and lack of access to education and employment opportunities. We must work together to dismantle the criminal networks that profit from human misery and ensure that victims receive the support and protection they need. Section 6. Echoes of the Past, Black Slavery and the Myth of White Slavery. It is crucial to acknowledge the specific historical and ongoing horrors of black slavery. The transatlantic slave trade was a unique and horrific system of racialized chattel slavery. It had a profound impact on the development of the Americas and continues to shape racial dynamics today. The term white slavery, while historically used to refer to the trafficking of white women for prostitution, is misleading and often used to minimize the horrors of black slavery. It is essential to avoid equating the two or using language that diminishes the unique and brutal history of black enslavement. Human trafficking is a horrific crime that affects people of all races and genders. However, it is crucial to use accurate language and recognize the distinct historical and social contexts of different forms of exploitation. Section 7. Towards a brighter future, legislative battles and advocacy for change. The fight to end modern slavery requires a multifaceted approach. This includes legislative reform, law enforcement efforts, and support for survivors. Advocacy groups are working tirelessly to raise awareness about human trafficking and push for meaningful change. Several states have taken steps to amend their constitutions to prohibit slavery and involuntary servitude in all forms, including as punishment for a crime. At the federal level, the proposed abolition amendment seeks to close the 13th Amendment loophole and abolish slavery in all its forms. The Fair Wages for Incarcerated Workers Act is another important piece of legislation that would ensure incarcerated individuals are paid a fair wage for their labor. This would help to dismantle the system of prison slavery and provide incarcerated people with a pathway to economic stability upon release. Section 8. A call to action, dismantling the systems of oppression. Ending modern slavery is not just the responsibility of lawmakers and activists. It is a collective responsibility that requires action from all of us. We can all play a role in dismantling the systems of oppression that allow slavery to persist. We can start by educating ourselves and others about the issue, support organizations working to combat human trafficking, and advocate for policy changes. Be mindful of our consumer choices and support businesses that uphold ethical labor practices. We must also address the root causes of slavery, such as poverty, inequality, and discrimination. By creating a more just and equitable society, we can help to prevent human trafficking and exploitation. Section 9. Hope for a Just World. Our collective responsibility to end slavery. The fight to end slavery is a marathon, not a sprint. It requires sustained effort, unwavering commitment, and a belief in the inherent dignity and worth of every human being. While the challenges are daunting, we must never give up hope. Together, we can create a world where every person is free from exploitation and oppression. A world where everyone has the opportunity to live a life of dignity and fulfillment. Let us honor the legacy of those who fought for freedom in the past by continuing their struggle today. The time for action is now. Let us join hands and work together to build a brighter future for all.